Thank you, John. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into the engineering report here. So over the last year, engineering has done a lot of hiring. I'm happy to say that we filled our open positions actually towards the end of the year. We found actually going through this process of trying to hire the number of people we did over the last year is actually fairly hard in the DC area because you have so many different places that are interesting to work. So it took us a while to actually find qualified candidates who are willing to work for us. We finally filled it up I think in November of last year. We are converting currently a contracting slot into 2 entry-level full-time employees. So if you know of any people that are graduating from college that want to have a cool engineering job, please send them my way. Challenges that we have upcoming is we're going to move, and actually that's first and foremost on engineering's mind. How we're going to make this move happen, how we're going to make it seamless. And the other thing that we have is just the issues of dealing with our current office space. So this past winter, I don't know how the rest of you all thought about it, but it was pretty challenging, especially with the number of people who are getting sick with the flu. In fact, we even had to quarantine one of the offices. So there's Lysol put in all throughout and everything else, and we told those people to go home for a while until the sickness it just went away. And it's mainly because they're working in such close quarters. So here's our staffing summary. You can see the number of people that we have in each department. 2 openings, again, are for the entry-level software test engineer and also for a developer. So here's our accomplishments since ARIN 36, and these are just sort of like the big ones, right? So we've done transfers that's all online now for you guys to go ahead and do everything. No longer need a template, and you can make that happen. The upcoming fee schedule, when that's announced or deployed, we're ready to go with the automation that we had to do with it. And we've done some UI work. Have any of y'all noticed some changes been made to ARIN Online lately? No. Well, we're going to go through some of this. So one of the things that we've realized is that, hey, people find it maybe not as intuitive as it ought to be. So we hired this UX person to help us figure out what we needed to do. And we also need to make this UI change because of SWIP easy. But the web is actually going to be very useful, and allowing people who have 1 or 2 reassignments need to be done at a time, actually using ARIN Online to make those changes. But to do that, we had to make some navigational changes. And to make that happen, we actually deployed a number of usability tests. Maybe some of you have been called. We've looked at volunteers at ARIN on the Road and sat down with them and looked at various options and which ones they liked, which ones that it was intuitive for them. We've we're going to be doing some remote testing fairly soon and been testing various aspects of the ARIN Online application. Finally, if you want to help or you think that the ARIN Online application is not very intuitive, send mail to usability@arin.net and we'll get you part of the usability test. So here's a preview of what it is the first part. When you log into ARIN Online, right now you get a static page. We're creating a more sort of dynamic page that's has a little bit more color to it and allows you to see in a little bit better detail of what's going on. In fact, I have a screen here so you can see a little bit better. What you will have here is the typical alerts, whether or not you have invoices coming due or past due, the associations you have, and some of the stuff may change because this has not been deployed yet. But you can see a summary of your inventory with ARIN. The other thing that you'll see on this is that we are actually using collapsible menus. And in this particular case, they clicked on tickets and messages, and you can see that 2 things popped up underneath that, tickets and the message center. So that way you can have an easier way of actually navigating ARIN Online. Here is the first part of SWIP Easy that's coming out. You can see now that we're starting to put reassignment information coming, and this will be out this summer. So you can start doing more and more of this stuff online. Again, one of the things that you'll be able to do is that instead of having a wall of text trying to explain these things, as you go through each of the data field elements, because there's a lot of acronyms used within ARIN, there's a little info button that you can push if you wanted to, so you can see what that information, that element is, in case you had any sort of questions. So, operational achievements. Well, one of the things that we put in this past year is a DDoS mitigation service on a couple of our public-facing sites. Public-facing being like Whois, IRR, and DNS. And we also put it on a provisioning site, and that's where ARIN Online is. That's where you send your mail and that sort of thing. This is a great thing to do, but sadly we've had to use it. We've had to use it 3 times. So, and this has been fairly commonplace. We were talking about this at the ITF about a week ago, where not only we've been attacked, but the root servers have been attacked as well. And some of the attacks that they've seen are just been absolutely huge. Ours have been fairly moderate size, and we'll go into that in a little bit. The only other thing that we're doing within ARIN is that we've had a security audit, and we're following a lot of the practices that they've given as recommendations, and doing a better job in terms of catching interesting traffic and making sure that our networks remain secure. So let's go back to the DOS attacks. So this person, it was three weeks out of 5. It always started on a Friday afternoon. And actually one of the operations manager, Pete, was always out of the office when this happened. Pete? He goes like this. He has no idea. But typically, they went on throughout the day. It's a fairly determined attacker. We start a DDoS mitigation plan. What we do in that case is we have a bunch of peers. We drop down all our peers except the one that has the DDoS mitigation service in, and we start scrubbing the traffic. And we're looking as well as a DDoS mitigation vendor, seeing what traffic is coming through and stopping them as they change the attacks. And these guys are actually fairly good at sort of twisting the knob in a different way to see if they can get through and filling your pipes again. They always ended at 1 in the morning. So Pete must have got tired. And they always only attacked our provisioning networks. They didn't go after our public-facing networks at all. So it's fine. And there was, like I said, there was multiple waves, and out of those waves, 70 gigabytes was the largest attack we had. Now we're going to go through some stats. I'm going to go through this fairly fast. You can see that ARIN Online, we have lots and lots of users in our system now, which is great. A number of users have logged in once and are done. A few more have gone more than once. And you can see that there's a number of power users that are more than have logged in more than 16 times. These are the DDoS attacks? The logins are the DDoS attacks, yeah. We can only support 1 login at a time. So here you can see our Reg RWS transactions. What this is a comparison of the red, which is the RESTful templates, RESTful transactions for reassignments that come in, versus the blue, which are templates. And you can see that they're both kind of leveling off. I'm not exactly sure what that means because it's an aggregate number, but they're starting to slow down a little bit in terms of reassignments, both on templates and RESTful transactions. DNSSEC. We are riding with the horses here in terms of we are doing just as well as VeriSign is in terms of populating CommonNet with DNSSEC records. So they have less than a percentage secured as well. We have a number of organizations that are playing with this, but again, the penetration rate for DNSSEC is small, not only for ARIN, but also for other TLD delegations as well. RPKI usage, again, this is sort of small growth. One of the things I'll note here is up-down delegated. You can see that we had 0 participants for a while. We went up to 1, then we went to 2, and then we went back to 1. And that 1 is really said, hey, look, I want to play in the system. So we say, you're delegated, but they've never done the next step saying, okay, here is basically, I want you to go ahead and sign all my resources and get that taken care of. They have never taken that second step. So they're in the system, but they are not in RPKI in total. So up, down, or delegated is just hard. Here you can see our who is queries per second. What's interesting on this, the red is port 43, the traditional port who is service. The restful service is the blue, and you can see that there's a blip that occurred last year in October and has since sort of regained itself. And a large part of that is people using the system. We find out that the use may be abuse, so we tamp it down, and they find different ways. We tamp it down. So that's something that we continually are watching over now. Who is over V6? You can see that this goes all wildly oscillates, and it goes all over the place, up to 20% and down to 5% where we're at now. Typically, probably should be maybe around 10. But this is all based on users and how much they use the system. If someone queries our WHOIS system a lot, or directory services system rather, a lot over v4, then that's going to widely change the numbers. RDAP. This is a really exciting protocol that actually we're not the only ones using this, but ICANN is using it as well. ICANN has a problem with internationalized domain names, in that the way of doing directory services before, there was no way for people to be able to use things in their own native text, or their own native script. They can use ASCII, and that was it. That's all WHOIS actually supports. So Andy Newton, who's the brainchild behind this, actually sat down with me, with ICANN people, and say, hey, look, we need to figure this out, and we have an idea, and let's go ahead and make this happen. This has since become an IETF standard. It's working through the ICANN process now for all the registrars and registries to support this. And you can see that we're starting to see some significant growth within ARIN as well as part of our RDAP service. IRR, and we're going to go into this now. Typically, it's about a 5 to 10% increase. Every time we have a meeting, it just grows by a little bit. Correspondingly, same things with route and route 6 objects, and with INET nums and INET 6 num objects as well. So there's just a steady growth going on with the IRR. One thing I will mention about the IRR, here you can see the organizations. I'll get back to what I was going to mention about in a minute. But you can see the number of organizations. There's a number of power organizations that are in our system using the IRR. There's a number of organizations have latched onto our service, mainly DDoS mitigation vendors for their backup routes, to go ahead and put them in the IRR. So that's one thing that as we look forward to changing the IRR system over this coming year, or the rest of the year, one of the things that we need to accommodate for those people, because they need to do this. DDoS is getting to be the thing of the day, and its backup routes are becoming a necessary requirement for DDoS mitigation to occur. So here's what we're working through 2016 until the next meeting. We're moving, and one of the things that we're doing as part of the move is we're changing our network so we have a more segmented network, so that we have better security controls in place. Right now, it's not as good as we really like it to be. We're rolling out SWIP Easy, of which you got just a teaser on the UI improvements. We're working at various ACSPs, of which you'll see some of that stuff coming out fairly shortly. Working on making our systems even more redundant than they are today. There are things that are fine on the backside, but we just want to make it even more robust than what we have now. And of course, we have a fairly significant technical backlog that we're working through. And this goes from moving from an old version of Java to actually doing some operating system configuration management with Puppet, so that whenever we roll out a new system, it's consistent with the way the old system was, and that there's no configuration gotchas, to improved monitoring and logging. And this is how we're catching all these sort of offending actors that know the threshold we have on who is and how far they can go and what they can make it happen under the limit, and we're actually seeing this by improved logging now. So I am done. Any questions? Okay.
I have two. The first one has to do with accessibility. Are you paying attention to that with ARIN Online?
Okay.
So we currently, our website is usable with accessibility aids, but it's been something, Mr. Bradner reminded us of this for many years, that it's an important thing. One of the things we're looking at with our redesign is trying to figure out how to make it more accessible. As it turns out, and use the accessibility aids better. As it turns out, some of that's becoming easier, because as you design a website that works on a variety of low bandwidth and low capability mobile devices, you pick up a lot of the aids for that. So we're hoping to make sure we can go from a fair job today to an excellent job with the rollout of new content management.
That's a good answer. Do you mind if I ask one more question? You mentioned Java 6 and Java 8. I understand that some people are worried that Java has security problems, or maybe it's the virtual machines that they run on. Is that of concern to you?
Yes. Well, Java 6 is out of support now, and it's just one of those things that we want to get to, but we also want to provide community new enhancements. And a part of those enhancements is making sure you keep up with the old. And we really need to start paying some of the attention to the old. So you don't see the changes, but we need to make those changes happen.
A question from online from Sandy Murphy of Parsons.
Yep.
She asks, are the DDoS mitigation backup route registrations done as proxy registrations on behalf of their customers? If so, do you have a way to ensure the proxy registration is valid?
So a large part of the IR, frankly, is built on trust. In terms of making sure that those people who are putting those routes know what they're doing. There's not, frankly, a lot of validation that goes on there. And yes, they're done by third party, they're proxy registrations.
Okay, back microphone.
Hi, Rob Seastrom, Time Warner Cable, ARIN AC. Vint beat me to it on the first part of the question, which involves accessibility. I work with a blind guy, which has made me a little bit more sensitive to that sort of thing. But it's not just adaptive devices. It's things like color choices, so you don't typically trip up people who are colorblind. And stuff. There's a whole bunch of things. And in fact, your tax dollars at work, there is a set of guidelines from the government called Section 508. Correct. I would highly recommend an actual formal audit to make sure that you're doing as well as you think that you are.
We actually did that. So as I said, Mr. Bradner reminded us of Section 508. I actually have worked with federal IT systems and quite aware of the requirements. We actually did a full 508 audit, I'm going to say about 6 years ago, but the website's changed over that period of time. So now that we're going to do a content management push, we're going to now incorporate the requirements necessary to do that. Generally, it's not as challenging as long as you realize that you have to be able to fall back gracefully in all circumstances. And it's not hard to do if you pay attention, but it doesn't happen automatically by any means.
Exactly, which is why I was recommending the audit to make sure that you're actually checking your work. Thank you.
Next microphone.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, ARIN AC. Just to clarify Vince's second question in regards to Java, were you recommending the abolition of using Java as a security nightmare, or just from the upgrade from 6 to 8?
I wasn't recommending anything. I was asking the question to find out whether there was whether the perceived security issue was A, known, and B, what was the plan for dealing with it. At Google, we frankly are not too excited about having Java, and we're on JavaScript instead.
Sorry, so it was not only about going from one version to another, but even the use of that period. So
one of the things that there's, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, there's like Java applets that you can actually run on your machine, right? This is different than that. This is either enterprise applications on the backside that have their security controls. And from an end user, you really don't know is Java unless it borks out and some sort of error message comes through and it looks kind of ugly, which frankly we don't want you to know about. So in that sense, Java is secure from the perspective of it's not going to impact customers in a poor way. We feel pretty confident that we have fairly good security controls on the backside. The big thing is if there's any things that are 0 days, or it could be 0 days on anything, essentially on these OSs, or frankly there's some bug that since this is no longer supported that comes out, we're kind of stuck. So we just need to move on.
Okay. So the two questions I had, or one was a statement. The first is, I appreciate you telling us about DDoSes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to be barraged with it, i.e., if you're taking care of it, I don't actually want to know. In fact, it's probably better that we don't know the severity or whatever. But I get a lot of emails from a lot of companies telling me about a lot of problems that they're having
Mm-hmm.
that are being fixed or being worked on, and it doesn't really impact me. That being said, if there's a mailing list for active issues with ARIN that people want to subscribe to, by all means. Maintenance windows are a different story. They are scheduled well in advance, everybody knows, and they are 100% service, or they can be service impacting to organizations. But every email I've seen on the DDoS says, we were hit, we've already mitigated it before this email went out, so therefore the email really is letting you know about something in the past.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me, and it just actually annoys me because I don't need that info.
The challenge we have is that a number of people send emails saying, are you down right now, or were you down 20 minutes ago? And so we actually have a high demand for people who are coming to us saying, I'd like to see a posting when you know you were down, so when I'm debugging something that happened 2 hours ago, I can tell the people who work for me they were down. That's why that information wasn't available.
I understand that's what a website's for. They can come and see what has happened, and you can do a log there. But having 100 people ask you something versus telling 10,000 people that something happened.
Okay.
The second part was in regards to your maintenance, and I want to reiterate this. I've brought it up in the past. A generic maintenance notification that your services are going to be down and that your services are going to be back up is useful from a time and date point of view, but doesn't give me any confidence as to what's happened. A change log at the end of it, if you are actually making changes. We have just updated this feature. We have just done this, so that I know that if something breaks, oh, it might be because you made a change, would really help me. And like I said, just knowing the time and date is not very useful.
Okay, so just to make sure I have this right, because we usually say the maintenance is completed, and then the following Monday, the new features are announced. So you would like to see those features announced when we say we're back up. Is that right?
When you originally sent it out,
Yep.
It would be wonderful for you to say the anticipated changes are
Okay.
the maintenance is completed, and these were the anticipated changes that we were working on, so people remember. And then on Monday you can say, hey, we backed out of this, we did this, that's
Okay.
fine. But at least people know what's actually going on before and at.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, rear microphone.
Stephen Middleton, Verizon Communications. Mark, a lot of good information up there. Thank you very much. I didn't see anything much about RAR, or IRR. Do you have anything in development coming down the pipe that you could share with us?
That's also mine. So that's actually mine. Mark is in the unfortunate circumstance that we need to tell him what we want. And that's actually, I should have had that on the services working group because that's been queued. We have asked a couple of times the community, tell us, do you want us to invest wholesale in IRR? Do you want us to potentially cease working, have some other approach? How much energy do you want and what level of effort? And we actually need a cohesive recommendation. So that's actually, I'm very glad you mentioned that because this morning I was racking my brain trying to remember. That's one that I absolutely need the services working group to come up with a comprehensive recommendation. We know some maintenance improvements we need to do, but that's to keep the current system running. What we really need is we really need a work list from you folks. How much do you want to put in here? Because we could We have varying comments in the community about how much level of effort should be put into IRR, and it's unclear until we have a comprehensive answer whether it's worth doing that investment.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions for Mark? Jason.
Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. Probably not a question for Mark, but a follow-on to the previous discussion. How does the community provide input to the services working group? Is that email that is publicly viewable also publicly postable?
So I actually was very sly, let's use that word. I didn't elaborate the details of the mechanics of how the working group would work, because I think it's fair to meet with them first. And unfortunately, while we appointed them last night, many of them aren't here, so we couldn't have a kickoff meeting. I'd like to sit down with the working group, understand what they want for dynamics, and then they can communicate how to work. The input to what goes on their work list will certainly be what comes into the suggestions process that I think needs a more clear or more community-considered method. But in terms of how they interface, how often they share documents, whether they work internally, I could try to tell you how I think they should work, but then it would be my group and not their group. So I'm going to let them meet and talk about their dynamics and have them tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay? Thank you very much.